A month ago, a couple of TV shows ended, Bojack Horseman and The Good Place. They're very different shows. Bojack is a cartoon about a sad horse, and The Good Place is a comedy set in the afterlife. But they end with strikingly similar symbolism. They both have a door that represents death. Bojack Horseman is about a man, or a horseman, who struggles with depression and addiction and dysfunctional relationships. He tries to be a better person, but over and over he relapses into self-destruction. In the last episodes, he goes on another downward spiral and starts to drown in a pool. And the penultimate episode is this surreal dying nightmare where Bojack has dinner with his friends and family who have died. They discuss the meaning of life, and the characters all have different perspectives. Like Sarah Lynn thinks her career and legacy give her life meaning. Corduroy says that life is about selfish pleasure. Secretariat says life is meaningless. And Herb says it's all about finding peace with your authentic self. One by one, these characters go through the door into death. But Bojack survives, and the finale is about him accepting that life goes on. He may never find happiness or stability, his relationships won't all last, but the only way forward is to try to be okay and to enjoy life while it lasts. Until he too goes through the door. In The Good Place, the heroes are all ordinary people who've died and gone to the afterlife. After 4 seasons of whimsical hijinks and moral philosophy, they manage to change the way the afterlife works to make it more fair. They abolish hell and make a new system where dead people get to learn to become better people until they get to go to heaven. But in the last episodes, they find that heaven gets boring and pointless when it lasts forever. Nothing is fun or meaningful if it never ends. People in heaven turn into zombies, slack-jawed, sweatpant-wearing orgasm machines. So the heroes create a door in heaven that when you choose to walk through it, you permanently die. Your soul is gone. After zillions of years in heaven, each of the main characters finally achieve fulfillment and peace, and one by one they walk through the door of death, on their terms, when they're ready. So, The Good Place and Bojack Horseman both suggest that to die well, you've got to live with meaning, and both shows explore different perspectives on what that meaning can be. The Good Place characters make peace with themselves, which is like what Herb advocates. Secretariat talks about suicide, ending life on his own terms, which is similar to this door. But Secretariat commits suicide because he thinks life is meaningless, whereas the Good Place characters die after living a meaningful life. When the main character Eleanor dies, we see some spark of her live on and continue to bring joy in the world, which connects to Sarah Lynn's ideas of legacy and impact. There's also some parallel to Corduroy's thesis on pleasure, when Jason spends time in heaven playing go-kart with monkeys. So there's no one answer to the question of the meaning of life and death. Like all good art, The Good Place and Bojack Horseman present some ideas and allow you to choose what's meaningful to you. Todd says that the point of art is less what creators put into it and more what people get out of it. The meaning is in your hands. There's also a meta aspect here, because these finales aren't just the endings of fictional character arcs, they're the endings of creative projects that real people spent years of work and passion to produce. And one of the hardest parts of making stuff is knowing when to stop. A lot of TV shows go on and on and on until they lose what made them good in the first place and they collapse into irrelevance, like The Simpsons or Lost or The Walking Dead or the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The ending of The Good Place suggests that stories should end on a high note, once they've said what they set out to say in the first place. But most of the time, our economic system doesn't believe in endings. It craves perpetual, unsustainable growth and repetition, which is why we've had 15 Call of Duty games in the last 15 years, and a fucking trilogy of Spider-Man trilogies. With all these sequels and reboots, economists project that by 2050, America's GDP will be 80% member berries, and the highest paid actor in Hollywood will be Carrie Fisher's corpse. The world is addicted to the lie of forever, and reminders of death, like old people, are pretty well hidden from our media and communities. We need stories like Bojack and The Good Place to help us to think about endings, and how to end well. Terry Pratchett, author of the Discworld series, suffered from early-onset Alzheimer's disease, a condition of slow cognitive decline that eventually leads to death. There's no effective treatment or cure. Terry became an advocate for assisted dying, arguing that people with terminal conditions should be able to end their lives on their terms when they're ready, without needless suffering. Terry met with a Swiss organization that provides assisted dying, and the guy said that once people have made the arrangements so that they have the option of assisted suicide, they often don't use it and end up living longer than expected. To know that you can go gives you strength, he says. In Terry's words, someone with the option of assisted dying can wake up each day and choose whether to continue living. And choosing, Terry says, is the most human thing. Choosing takes away the fear, the uncertainty. It gives you control of your own destiny. Having a door, an exit, allows you to live your best life while you can. Still, Terry had some worries about people having access to death at any time for any reason. Like, remember those suicide booths in Futurama? You can buy death on any street corner for the low price of a quarter, which is obviously horrifying and perverse, though it kind of makes sense that people would need death in Futurama. This is a high-tech, far future where people often live for hundreds of years. In one episode, we see that old people are mandatorily plugged into a giant matrix that simulates retirement in Florida. Other people live as disembodied heads in glass jars.
As a head without a body, I envy the dead.
No argument here.
There are lots of stories about immortality being awful. There's that one guy in The Hitchhiker's Guide who's immortal, so to keep himself busy, he decides to personally insult to their face every person in the universe, alphabetically. And by book 3, he's up to A for Arthur Dent. Often, immortality comes at a cost. Like, in Greek mythology, this guy Tithonus got eternal life, but he didn't get eternal youth. So he grew older and older and older and more frail until he couldn't move, and he lost his wits to just babbling, but he never died, and it was horrible. So his lover, the goddess Eos, put him in her chamber, and she closed the shining doors over him. From there, his voice still pours out. It seems never to end. So for thousands of years, people have told stories about death being good and natural and nothing to fear. That's one of the main themes in Harry Potter. The main motivation of the bad guy, Voldemort, is his fear of death. He commits evil like making Horcruxes in a futile quest for immortality. But the hero, Harry, learns that death should not be feared. In the end, Dumbledore says that the true master of death does not seek to run away from death, he accepts that he must die. One should greet death as an old friend and go with him gladly, to step through the door without fear. Because whether we like it or not, the end will come. The end of stories, of careers, of relationships, and of lives. And you can either face the door with fear and regret and panic, or you can live your life in such a way that when the end comes you feel peace and love and gratitude, and you'll be ready to walk through the door. See, that would be such a neat, satisfying ending to this video, wouldn't it? Except that there's something false about the reassuring story. Death isn't really a door. Death is not a place that you go because there is no other side. Our memories and our personalities and passions are made of neurons. We know this because when the brain is damaged, our memories and our personalities are damaged. When we alter the brain with drugs, the mind is altered. When we cut the brain in half, when we saw it in two through the corpus callosum, the mind is cut in two. Look that shit up. You are your brain meat. And when the brain meat rots, you do too. There is no other side. And if death is a door, it's a fake one. It goes nowhere. Death is the end of the line. So maybe we should be afraid. And maybe we don't have to take it lying down. The CGP Grey says that death is a dragon, a tyrant that we've convinced ourselves is inevitable, that we need it. Death causes so much loss and pain, but because we can't stop it, we convince ourselves that it's good, like we have some Stockholm syndrome, like an abusive partner. Maybe we can slay the dragon, fight death, and kill it. Rage against the dying of the light, right? Just 100 years ago, most people died before they were 35 years old, mostly because of infant mortality. People died of preventable diseases and conditions, which back then were seen as natural and inevitable, but now the average life expectancy is 70. People live twice as long. And now, dying young is a tragedy, a terrible, preventable waste, when before it was normal. Maybe in the future, when people live even longer, we'll look back at dying at 70 as a preventable, needless tragedy. We tell ourselves that the status quo is natural and normal and inevitable, but nothing about our reality in 2020 is natural or normal. Everything's artificial, temporary, precarious, changeable, and that includes the door. We want our lives to be stories that make sense, like TV episodes with a beginning, middle, and end. And the door is a comforting metaphor, but real life doesn't give the satisfaction of a neat ending, and we don't